to the Global View podcast. Today's focus will be on women's rights and equality, where I've had the opportunity to interview Arlinda Clark, chair of the Montgomery County Commission for Women, an organization that brings light to many of the disparities that women face. So, to start off, can you please introduce yourself and feel free to include any information about your occupation, background, and anything that's relevant to the topic of feminism and equality?
Well, I am Arlinda Clark. I am the chair of the Montgomery County Commission for Women. Uh, and with that mission is we in briefly um, stand in the gap to enhance women's lives in Montgomery County. And I lead that effort along with the commissioners. And we provide advice to the county executive as well as Montgomery County Council and any of the Maryland legislative areas on the gaps or any issues that affect women in Montgomery County.
So, in Montgomery County or even nationally, what legislative actions have been taken to further women's rights?
Well, I want to focus mainly in Maryland, and these are some of the things that we as a organization actually have stood behind and advocated for, provided testimony for, and was helpful in passing that in Maryland. We've had several actions to protect women. One was and a bill regarding consent for sexual crimes, because consent is the starting point of determining when a sexual crime has occurred. So there has been a huge effort in making certain that consent is defined and that it is addressed adequately so that women could get rights that are afforded to them. We also advocated for the Maryland Assistance Programs for Personal Care Aides. And that's for home care workers who are employed by residential service agencies. And it was to promote that they receive Medicaid reimbursements, those that receive Medicaid reimbursements to promote that they are entitled to key employee benefits that they were denied that others may get. So, it's several of the legislations are to even the playing field and make things a little more transparent in pay wage and opportunity for women. As a matter of fact, one of the measures was equal pay for equal work, and it was a wage range transparency bill, and it required employers to include the pay range and a general description of benefits and any other compensation in their job postings in Maryland. Now, all of these are for Maryland bills, but those are just some of the ways. And I'd say one of the others is, protection of healthcare. That is a huge, huge, huge area, and particularly with women. One of the bills that we supported was the passage of making contraception um, uh, uh, accessible in community colleges and institutions in Maryland. For emergency contraceptives. So that's a big bill. Access is important, and particularly in that childbearing age group. And one of the things we're focusing on now is menopause advocacy. We are working on and will be working and advocating for menopause advocacy because menopause, the physical and social effects of menopause affect women, particularly in the workforce. So those are some of the things that we have been addressing and that we stand behind, and that's just recently in this year. And we continue to do so for like-minded bills that will come up. We partner with Maryland Legislative Advocacy Group, and we for women, and we are work within jointly on legislation in Maryland that supports women.
So, what legislation has also hindered women's rights?
Well, I think that any legislation, without getting into any specific one bill, I would say any legislation, and I tell you the big one right now is there's a lot of discussion about reproductive rights, and that's all over the nation. And while it doesn't matter which side you fall on in terms of, I know that there's a big talk about abortion across the United States, and I say that because I know it's a hot topic. But with that, there were other rights that are attached to the abortion bills because they are reproductive rights that affect women. And that is probably the most prominent one, and everyone is hearing about today. There are many other rights and many other health concerns that are attached to uh, uh, reproductive care, the prevention of pregnancy, the handling of pregnancy in an emergency situation. All of those, because of some of the way the laws are crafted, have been affected negatively. So there is a huge push to kind of parcel out those things and make certain that the women have the protection that they need.
So, what is the biggest obstacle that women face in achieving equal pay and preventing workplace discrimination?
The biggest obstacle, I think, understanding, education, understanding and making certain that everyone knows where the transparency in the gap of where the playing field needs to be leveled. That's one. I think opportunity for women to even gain the education that they need to support them in some of the jobs where in which they are employed, and it may be due to factors. And I say that because it's not that they don't have the right to be educated or the opportunity in terms of acceptance into programs. It is the time and availability because women are still major caregivers of children in their homes even today. I think the playing field has leveled out more over the years, but they're still they're the ones that give life to the children. So they're the ones that are first to be affected by that because they do give life to the children. They supply the means for a child to be fed during for those that breastfeed right after bearing children. So everything that is associated with that affects the women probably more negatively than men in most occasions. That's not in all cases, but in most occasions. So that affects your job opportunities, that affects your ability or the opportunity maybe to acquire more education. And also affects, and if you are a single parent, whether that be male or female, actually, but if you are a single parent, particularly female, because they're usually the one, that is taking care of the child, that makes it even more difficult because you have some economic disadvantages that will hit you on top of everything else. So those are some of the just high level things that people see on the surface that will affect a woman.
So, in general, what do you believe is the biggest issue that women face today?
Wow. I I say just gender disparity. I think there have been great strides in the United States through the years. Women have been very vocal and have been successful in many respects, but there still is a huge disparity between financial. Um, there's a financial disparity between women and men. There's still a wage gap that needs to be addressed. There is still the, I would say, there's still some stigma that is attached to women that shouldn't be because this is just something that's been passed down through the years. I mean, you often hear if a woman is very stern and very steadfast in her business, she's usually tagged as being difficult. Whereas with a man, he's a great debater. He's a that. So that stigma just doesn't seem to go away. It's getting better, but those are the things that are attached to a woman just because she's a woman and for no other reason.
So, I think this is a good segue into my next question, but how has the view of women changed and developed in the past 20 years or even longer, and what stereotypes are still present?
Well, I think let's hit the negative first. I think the stereotypes that are still present are those that, yes, they have been there for a long time, that women are weaker, women can't make up their minds, women are not great decision makers, you can't work well with women. I think that those are the things that still continue to exist. The things I think they have made improvements with is narrowing that wage gap. I think that's gone away. I think they have made more strides in um, becoming uh, officers of corporations, board members. They're making more strides. You are seeing more women in these positions, and what that means is there's more of an acceptance that the reality is that there is why women and men may do things in different fashions. It might not be predicated on the fact that they're a woman or they're a man. It may be other factors that come into play. So I think those are where the disparities lie.
So, my last question is, what are some ways the average person can advocate for women's rights and equality?
Great question. And one of the things that we do every year, and it segs right into it, is we have a limit women's legislative briefing every year in January. And I say that because this year the thing that we focused on was just that, how to how to how to have a proposal or an idea, start with an idea and end up in legislation that will advance the rights to everyone or your particular group. So I think the ways to do that is to find out, what is your passion, what group that you need to do, what you need to do to uh, find out how that passion is affected by the societal mores and what needs to be done to even a playing field or advocate your position, who you need to address your position to. You need to know the process of how a bill is passed through legislation on all levels, because you need to decide what forum that you would like this bill to go into. So I think just understanding the legislative process in general is a huge help. I think understanding what's at stake when you're voting on local levels, national levels, it doesn't matter. Understanding what you're voting for, understanding how any initiative that you're voting for is going to affect you as a woman and what that means. And it's enough so you need to vote yes or no and not just follow the crowd. You really need to understand how it's going to impact you and read the bill very carefully because I know sometimes they're very long, but there are a lot of things that are hidden in small print. So it's taking the time to understand that and asking the questions when you don't understand. Understand who your legislative counterparts are in the area in which you live. Have those discussions with those persons and understand, what their priorities are and have them to understand what you see as a priority in your community.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to the Global View podcast today.